What's difficult often flows into what's interesting and vice versa. But one of the things that I find so fascinating about gardenias is its in complex relationship with tradition. And the tradition, when I say the tradition, I'm talking about the Western Romance tradition. The story of heteronormative romantic love that comes down to us all the way heteronormative from Song of Songs through all of the Greek epics into the Latin poetry, on through the Middle Ages and the Renaissance and the 19th century. The Western Romantic tradition. And when Monet chooses to include references to that tradition, he's making a claim. He wants us to connect this sad poem about a man losing his beloved male partner. He wants to connect it with that tradition, to honor the relationship, but also to honor the tradition. Although he has a problem. How can he both revel in this inheritance that he has, that's so beautiful, the absolute right love of Songs, the romantic excitement of Dante's Paolo and Francesca, King Arthur, Guinevere, Lancelot, the beautiful, perfect, idealized love of the Roman poets. How does he both reference that, but also tie it to who he is, who he loves, and how he lives? So that's a really interesting challenge, I think. And what does he do? Well, I want to argue, or what I find interesting is, how when you have this great romantic tradition that happens to be between men and women, how do you gay it up? How can he both honor and make space for himself and his relationship within this tradition? And by the way, it's important to say that we're in the real world in this elegy. Elegies are written by real people for real people. This is like memoir. It has claims to truth. This elegy is an elegy to Roger Horowitz. Not just made up, not fantastic, not fiction or make-believe. This is true in real world. So it's an interesting game of how can I both bring this sometimes fictional make-believe tradition, but let it really inform how I live and who I am today. Well, let's go back and look at this heteronormative tradition. You're already pretty experienced in it because we've been reading books, Dante, Song of Songs, well, what do we have? We have lots of nature, and more specifically, one of the biggest parts of that tradition is flowers. And in the tradition of the West, the flower is what? What flower is it? Well, it's a rose. We have the tale of Guinevere and Lancelot is first accounted in a story called Le Roman de la Rose, the story of the rose. We have flowers all over the Song of Songs, mostly lilies, as opposed to roses, but flowers nevertheless. And flowers, this giving, we have a giving of a rose to the one that we love. Roses are always given by a man to a woman in the tradition. They're part of courtship. What we share is the beautiful blossom and the beauty and the perfection of that visual red rose. It's a sign of true love, or a vow of true love, that the man gives to his virgin beloved. And as a front-end courtship, beautiful blossom, visually perfect, It's also important to notice that a rose has a long perpendicular stem, and on top of it is bobbing this little red round thing. And anytime we have a round red tip with a long vertical line, we know now, after all those keys and locks and those banners in Song of Songs, we know that we're talking about a phallic symbol. A rose is not a penis, but a single red rose, a long stem red rose. It's going to be a long stem rose. A single long stem red rose is in fact a symbolic penis. It is I'm giving you this rose now because you will give me your virginity and your love, and I will give you this red rose now, and later what I will give you is my red-headed penis, which I will place into you, and because you're a virgin, you will bleed red. Because I will break your hymen, and you will prove your virginity, your virtue, and your purity with the red that you bleed when we consummate our love on our wedding day, when I prick you with my red rose. So that beautiful, when you're watching The Bachelor and he gives the rose at the end, grown-ups know, adults know, or those who have been read through the tradition, which we do in places like college, we now know as adults that there's a symbolic traffic here going on. There is a play, there's cultural play about the importance of virtue, the importance of commitment, the importance of discernment that you're the right one for me and I'm the right one for you, and that this symbolic play of the Valentine's Day red rose is, sort of, now we just say, let's, Netflix and chill. But nevertheless, we live and have lived through that tradition. And this is also Monet's tradition. Gay though he may be, he was raised in the same tradition that you are raised in and that I am raised in. So, okay, at some level, how do I take this symbolic system and gay it up? Well, I still want it to be nature, and there's a lot of nature in this love poem. I still want to talk about flowers and all their beauty, but what do? I'm going to talk not about a rose, a singular one rose, that's about that singular consummation of our love, that one lovemaking that ends your virginity and starts our union. I'm going to turn it into gardenias. And gardenias are a flower that the man gives to the man. By such small tokens did our world, I would bring one in bold so you could smell it by your desk. By such small tokens did our world grow green. A man can give you a flower just like men before me have given flowers to their women. I'm going to give one to my man. However, as the poem goes on, we know that this sign of love, this poem of floral love, is not about courtship. It's about the end of the relationship. It's not about the pleasures of courtship and the promise of eroticism. It's about the end of a relationship and the pain of loss. He's taking the symbolic symbol of the rose and he's inverting it. He's turning it upside down, literally. Love is a flower. Love is a rose. Pain is not a flower. Pain is a root. And just as the pleasure and desire of the heteronormative tradition are signs of true love, the power and extremity of my loss is a sign of my true love. We never understand our loving as much, how deep it is, as when we lose someone. And everyone who's lost a parent or lost a child or lost a good friend knows that feeling. Funerals, the deaths, the passings are so intense and somber and big because they mark the depth, the reality of the love that we have for each other. So both extremes, pleasure, desire, and grief and loss, are tied in this very fine filament of human love. Okay. It's not really about the perfect beauty of the visual. It's about smell. Fourth day, yellow and smutty. Another sense of all enveloping sensory awareness as opposed to the visual awareness that we have of the red bloom. And not a singular red flower, but hundreds of gardenias. They bloom again and again and again. If the red rose symbolized virginal blood on the breaking of a hymen, so it's tied to blood red and a bodily fluid, well, white gardenias, smutty, which means dirty or bruised or yellowing, white gardenias that happen again and again and again and again, well, it's not about a singular love act, it's about multiple acts of love. And instead of blood, we have the white smuttiness of ejaculate. That would be the fluid that is. Now, this is going pretty far with this symbolic system, but once you add everything up, I think, I would argue that it's warranted in a symbolic way. Just as the red is evoked the virginal blood is evoked in a symbolic way. So we have singular red virgin sex, we have multiple pleasure gay sex, boom, 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 boom. What when we have not the blossom, but we have the root. We have a poem that visualizes, symbolizes, signifies, and romps in the rootedness of love. Not its first blush beauty, but the core of our being that happens when we have lived a too short life with a too beloved man. How do you gay it up? Well, I think it's a pretty good job. It's a powerful evocation of the floral flower symbolism that the Western tradition gives, and yet it's an aversion, a twisting, a changing of that, not denying that tradition, but making space in it, making a room, legitimizing Monet's love for Horowitz in a cultural way, not in a symbolic way. Not just a, rainbow flags, we are here kind of way. So pretty interesting to me anyways, and I think pretty interesting to us. And so it's a sad poem, but I think it's it's another kind of hell. We've sort of moved from Dante to a contemporary hell, the hell of a plague that was killing loving and young people.